All right. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Njeri Mwangi, and I'm very pleased and honored to be hosting this conversation. With me, I have a panel of incredible and amazing people. And the topic today that we'll be discussing is financial resilience for Africa's pro-democracy movement. A lot of things have been happening, not just in this part of the world, but generally globally, that are affecting how we're doing our work, especially in terms of fighting for our spaces and fighting for our democracies. Some have been compromised, but largely what is happening and what we are seeing is a lot of organizations are really struggling financially. And the big question is, how are we going to be sustainable? Or are we sustainable? Are we going to storm through these trying times? And if we do, how are we going to do that? And my panel today is going to help us just look at options and see what alternatives there are. Most of us have been funded by Western organizations, INGOs, and they've done a fantastic job getting us to where we've come, how far we've come. But it is not sustainable. When you look at the effect of the wars in Ukraine, in Israel, and how that has affected the funding landscape. When you look at the shift of power, even in the US, whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans that are leading, you see how it affects funding in the global South, how it affects funding in Africa. When you look at the high administration cost in some of these countries, and I will speak especially in my country, in Kenya, and you see how there are punitive measures that have been put by the PBO Act that is in Kenya currently. There are underfunded budgets, even by the West when we're given these grants. There's a high rate of inflation. There is unpredictable taxation policies. Where does that leave many organizations that depend on funding? But again, we have depended largely on funding. Is that the way forward? Is there any other way? Are there any other options? So my panel today is going to be helping us to look at options that we have, alternatives that are available, that maybe some of us have explored, others may not even be aware of. And my hope is that today, when we come out of this webinar, is that we'll be able to know what other alternatives are there and how we can use them to leverage our organizations and for growth and sustainability. In my panel, I have Grace Mange. She's the Executive Director of the Kenya Community Development Foundation, which is KCDF. She's also a member of the East Africa Philanthropy Network. She's a human rights lawyer and an advocate of the High Court of Kenya with extensive work experience in the governance sector that spans over the last 19 years. Grace has worked at the national, regional, and continental, even international level in key governance civil society organizations and has a wide experience in social justice and societal transformation work. For most of her career, Grace has focused on the advancement of human rights, gender equality, access to justice, governance and democracy, civic education and engagement, civil society strengthening, community development, and transitional justice issues. She has a deep passion for human rights, environmental conservation, and social justice. My other panelist is Yemi Adamolekun, is the Executive Director of Enough is Enough. She campaigns for better governance in Nigeria and is also a Senior Associate in the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Yemi participates in political discussions and was awarded a Global Citizen Prize in 2022. So I've told you my panel is a very powerful group of women from Africa. My other panelist is Dr. Mankodi, who joined Kagiso Trust as the Chief Executive Officer in November 2015. She also serves as the co-chair of Kagiso Shanduka Trust and an experienced group of CFOs, Chief Financial Officer. She has more than 20 years experience with listed and private blue chip companies as well as public entities. Dr. Mankodi has seen numerous achievements in her career over the years, including 3 clean audits in succession for the city of Johannesburg. She has successfully meeting all FIFA requirements pertaining to structures for the 2010 FIFA World Cup, providing the first municipal export credit agencies funding for buses for BRT. Guys, our panel is amazing. It's on fire. Next, I have Femi. Femi is also from Nigeria. This is a he. He's a social entrepreneur, innovation consultant, service designer, learning scientist, and startup coach. He's very passionate about helping individuals and organizations be their best self and do their best job to enable a better world. He currently works in the financial freedom team at the Human Rights Foundation, and in his role as Global Bitcoin Lead, he drives strategy and execution of the HRF Bitcoin Development Fund, a fund dedicated to growing adoption of Bitcoin, adjacent freedom technologies, especially in countries under repressive regimes. And I talked about where we are coming from, even as a continent, and many countries are suffering from repressive regimes. Previously, Femi was the CEO of Color Africa, recently acquired by Btrust, and an engineering training program that helped African software developers transition to a career in Bitcoin AMP, lighting development, which was acquired by Btrust, and AMP transformed into Btrust Builders. So my last panelist is Hanifa Farsafi. Hanifa came to the limelight recently in Kenya with what we call the Maandamano that happened in the wave of June and July. She's a Kenyan influencer primarily on the social media platform X, and an activist and a social commentator. She mostly focuses on social issues affecting society, which has forced government officials to fix recurring problems. Besides online activism, Hanifa is also a writer and runs a popular blog that highlights various issues affecting Kenyans. Now, my panel is very amazing and incredible, and they're going to be talking to us about where we are at financially and what options there are. Are we as a citizenry, are we as Africans able to fund our democracy? Do we have to wait on and depend on the West to give us the money that we need to move forward? I'm seeing there is a lot of messages coming, so let me just see, just in case somebody's struggling to hear me. You can put your names and tell us where you're joining us from in the chat box. I will try and continue to check if there are any comments and questions that are coming up. We're going to have a session of question and answer towards the end. But to start us off, I'm going to ask Grace. For a long time, the pro-democracy movements in Africa have relied on their Western funders to support their causes which join us together, which we are all passionate about. In your experience, are there any opportunities that the movement has been missing out on, either consciously or subconsciously?
Thank you so much, Njeri, and greetings to everyone calling in from Nairobi, Kenya. It's great to be on this very important platform, also with very esteemed panelists. In terms of our sector and some of the opportunities probably that we have missed subconsciously, as you've said, or even consciously, I look at it from the perspective of right from the foundation. Our foundations as organizations, what was the thinking behind it? What was the rationale, and what systems were put in place? When it comes to where you get your resources from, right from the beginning, when you're setting up your organization, that's one of the key things that you must think about. And when we have had conversations and the issue of sustainability has not come up in the beginning, then we should recognize that that's a missed opportunity. I think, unfortunately, some of the systems and practices that have been put in place have been fashioned in such a way that they do not allow us to even have a conversation around sustainability. You'd see traditionally, and I'll speak from the Kenyan context, is that not-for-profit organizations were really not encouraged to have their own resources or even have ways of being able to access resources locally or ways of growing those resources. So that was really starting off on a wrong footing from inception in terms of the growth of the civil society movement in Kenya. You would find that development partners would have conversations about sustainability, but it would be rooted on sustainability of the project or the program rather than the organization. Yet we know it's the organization that is interacting on pro-democracy issues, interacting with the citizenry. So we need to already start changing our mindset that we must also focus on our sustainability as an organization on the issues that we're working on. And how do we do that? We need to look at what tools, opportunities that are there, and that's the whole point of this conversation today. And so looking at also how do we raise our own income, our own resources? How do we prevent challenges that will come from shocks, like we saw with COVID? How do we build our resilience? And how do we constantly have conversations around our sustainability? I think one of the key things that we need to look at moving forward is how do we leverage, sorry
to interrupt you. I'm getting comments that you're not audible, very audible. I can hear you well, but I don't know if there's anything you can do on your end. And for those who are joining us, please increase your volume. It could also be the gadget that you're using that has low volume. So increase your volume as well. Sorry to interrupt you, Grace. Go on. No, now I've lost you completely.
Sorry, I was on mute. Can you hear me now?
Clearly? I can hear you.
Okay. So thanks for alerting me to that. I hope I can be heard now. So I was speaking to us changing our mindset with regards to our sustainability and us putting in place mechanisms that enable us to leverage on opportunities that are there. There's opportunities in terms of speaking to issues that are core to the people that we serve, to the area that we serve, and therefore leveraging on getting that support. I think also one key thing that probably even myself, having worked in the governance space for a number of years, we would shy away from engaging with private sector to support our work. There was always the notion that private sector would support more education, development-focused issues, for example, and would not be interested or willing to support democracy issues, or would see us as disruptors to them being able to make profit. I think a time has come in Africa whereby conversations are happening around how do we secure our continent and how do we support key issues that will catalyze our development and sustainable development. So I see opportunities moving forward. Let me pause there so as not to take up so much time. Thank you, Njeri.
Thank you so much, Grace. I think it's very critical that we realize one of the problems that we are running into is that dependency on the West in terms of funding our democracy. They drive, and you talked about issues that are driven by the projects that we are either looking for grants for, or issues that are driven by all our organizations, the organizations that we have set up for the causes that we have set them up for. I think one of the things that we need to come home to is knowing that we are the ones that have to deliver ourselves. We're the ones that have to drive ourselves. We have to drive our initiatives and our agendas. So again, what would you say are some of the key strategies that local pro-democracy NGOs across Africa have used to balance international support while still maintaining local accountability? Because there's what you've talked about, the issues that are driven by the organizations, and there's what is the issues that are driven by who is funding you. So what key strategies have been used or can be used to balance both this support while maintaining accountability in the areas that we work in?
Thank you for that. Sorry, I didn't hear you.
No, I was giving it back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I think when it comes to maintaining local accountability, what organizations, what strategies have been used have included ensuring that whatever work we are doing, whatever issues we're speaking to, are really those coming from the community, at the community level, at the local level, at a national level. So if it's issues around anti-corruption conversations, issues around freedom of association, freedom of issues around access to information. Those are the ways that we are able to stay grounded and accountable to local communities and to the people that we serve, because we're picking the issues that are real. And it's very important for an organization to pick issues that its constituents are facing, not issues that are not relevant, because the minute you pick issues that people are not feeling, are not touched by or affected by, then you lose the local legitimacy or even individuals' willingness to support your work. I think it's very important. So the key strategies that have been used is really picking up issues right at the community or local level, whether it's forced abductions, what we have seen in terms of disappearances, extrajudicial killings, and amplifying that in that space. Other strategies have also included ensuring that as we are discussing how we're going to tackle these issues, that there's close collaboration with the affected persons, because we are working on behalf of, none of us exist for ourselves, but we exist for humanity. We exist for the communities that we serve. So ensuring that whatever strategies we're employing are really connected with the constituents that we serve. So right from the design that we're designing with them, we're looking at strategies they've used in the past, what has failed, how do we do it differently, but also fundamentally, how do we report back? So for instance, even as an organization, you've received foreign funding, being able to be accountable and saying, we've received X funding to do 1, 2, 3, 4, which we discussed. This is how we have done it. Do you think we have done well or not? And reporting on that and seeing where to course correct. Those are some of the strategies that have been used to enhance that local accountability. But I think one of the myths that we have to break is that issues around democracy are foreign. They are not foreign. They are as African as we are historically. And so how do we ensure that those misinformation, disinformation, misconceptions are addressed? And I think we're starting to see that as a wave going throughout Africa. Thank you so much.
I like what you're saying about issues around democracy are not foreign, because for a long time, people keep thinking and even saying that the activists that are pushing these things are pushing agendas of the West. But you've very well detailed how these are issues that affect the communities, because we're humanitarian and they're issues that we try and help communities to realize. So it is up to us to see how we can continue this. And part of that is that accountability and collaboration with people that we are representing and are working for and with, and also those who are giving us money in terms of support. Now, Yemi, I have another question. The African diaspora represents a very vast, largely untapped resource for supporting democratic causes. Are there any engagements in the diaspora in financially supporting Africa's democracy, pro-democracy movement? I say this coming from knowing that there is a huge percentage, and we have seen even in Kenya, they have a great potential in terms of supporting, whether they're supporting their families or sending money home for investment, for office, or initiatives where there have been crises. We've seen a lot of people sharing and supporting causes within the continent. Would you say, or what would you say, are there ways of engaging the diaspora in financially supporting the movement in your experience? Yemi?
Good. Yes, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Njeri. Thank you for having me. Hello, Femi. I haven't seen Femi in a while. Hi. And it's an interesting question that you asked, because I spent about 2 weeks in the US in October trying to engage the Nigerian diaspora on the very question that you mentioned. But at least I think let's take it back a little bit. So the Nigerian diaspora sends home approximately $20 billion every year. That's, I don't know, almost $2 million a month. Now, but that money is gone to pay for social services. So you're paying for school fees, you're paying for healthcare, you're paying for rent, basically government, you're paying for government failure. But it's similar to what the Americans call a black tax. You basically tax your rich cousin, brother, whatever it is, to fill in a gap because either social services are failing or you are having a challenge of a sort. I have a very good friend in Nigeria, Aisha Yesufu, who when people send her a message that they need help with healthcare, education, whatever it might be, the first question she will ask you is, did you vote? Are you registered to vote? Do you know who your senator is? Do you know who your House of Rep member is? Because her point is, I cannot continue to subsidize government failure and your laziness. Because the context and the kind of loop she's trying to make is that all the things you're asking me to pay for out of my own money are things that government should have provided to you as a citizen of the state or of the country. And so, I mean, in some cases, she would eventually support, but she takes them through that journey for them to understand clearly that you can't just run to me without having done your part. And so if I now take that back to diaspora, it's the similar thing. People reach out and out of compassion, empathy, maybe a sense of guilt for some, that you're in a better position than they are, you send money home. But you don't interrogate why it is that they come to you. So the space where I see people in diaspora support our democracy is in supporting candidates for elections. So we see that, I don't know about Kenya, but in Nigeria, quite a number of presidential candidates then do kind of diaspora roadshows, go and court members of the community in the diaspora who cannot vote, by the way. So you're simply quoting them for money. They can't vote. Maybe some of them might use their influence to guide how people at home respond. But for the most part, you're going to them for money. And that's where they see their role in supporting candidates. So in the conversations that I had over the last month, what I find, and I think Grace made the point, it's much easier for people to give when they see crying children with snots in their noses, crying, malnourished children. Emotive things, healthcare, education are always easier to get money from. Governance is a bit nebulous in their minds because when you solve the problem of a child's education, it's instant. So I renovate a classroom, I put in chairs, I put in desks so children are not sitting on the floor. I can give you a picture in a month of how you've transformed the life of a child. You feel good, everybody's happy, kumbaya. But if I ask you to give me money for civic education, on letting citizens understand the connection between their voting choices and their quality of life, understanding what it means to be in a democracy, and therefore that they have agency, it's a bit more nebulous because I can't show you instant results. I can't come back in a month and show you a transformed citizenry, a transformed country. But therein lies where we need to do this work. And I like the question that Njeri asked. Are we as Africans able to fund our democracy? 100%, we're able to fund it. The question is, are we willing to fund it? Because the demographic, in my view, that technically understands, which is the educated elite on the continent, are the very demography that benefits from the dysfunction that we see. When I started leading Enough is Enough in 2011, my theory of change was very simple. Get Nigerians who are the educated elite to understand the connection between poor governance and their own self-interest. We're the ones that run businesses, so you need an educated populace to manage your business and manage it well. So you should be interested in education policies. We're the ones that drive the most expensive cars. You should be interested in how roads get fixed. I went to a public school. I'm sure Femi went to a public school. The public schools we went to, we can't send our children to. So you should be interested in the quality of public schools. So you're not looking for a lot of money to send your children to private schools. If anything happens to you that needs a hospital before they fly you out of the country, you should care that they're decent healthcare facilities. And so that was my very clear theory of change. I just need to get the educated elites to connect the dots. Yada, yeah. Nah, not quite. Because they're the very ones who benefit from the dysfunction. And so when we talk about the people who can fund the democracy, those are the ones in a sense maybe at scale. So maybe if we're not looking for big money and we're looking for lots of small amounts of money, we can expand the net. But for those who can actually bring the money that a Ford Foundation, a George Soros, a Rockefeller Foundation, the Hilton family, those types of money are the very educated elite on the continent that their interest is not served by accountability. So those are the questions we need to ask. Njeri, are you there?
Yes. Thank you so much for your, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. We just can't see you, but we can hear you.
I do not know what is happening with my, let me see. You can see me now. Great. Thank you so much, because I feel like this is the language of every African. You sounded, if you didn't say Nigeria, I would have said you're talking from experience being a Kenyan, because everything that you're saying, it is true that we fund, or at least most of what is funded is the failure of government. So we are always subsidizing, even as organizations. Yet if we were able to give money, if we're able to hold our, and this is where democracy comes in a big way. If we're able to hold our governments accountable to deliver the services to the people that they're supposed to be delivering, then we would see a decrease in the need for, as you called it, black tax. Because then we would be able to take our children, like you said, to public schools, which we went to, but we now can't take our children to. So things have gotten really bad with time, but they need to be getting better. So I hear what I'm hearing you say is that what the responsibility of the Africans in the diaspora can do is to ask the citizens, to ask their relatives back home about, have they voted, who do they vote for, or who are they planning to vote for, why? Because if these people do the job that they're supposed to do, then the black tax will decrease, which is almost 50, in some cases more than 50% of what they earn out in the West. So thank you so much for what you've shared. Maybe as a follow-up question, as a follow-up question, which I'll ask Dr. Mankodi to respond to. Given the rise of domestic philanthropy and corporate social responsibility initiatives, we've seen a lot of organizations have an arm of corporate social responsibility. And we've seen a lot of domestic philanthropy, like we saw in Kenya, the wave of, and we've seen a lot of Kenyans giving money to different causes and to different countries, giving money for different causes. What role can African businesses and philanthropists play in sustaining democracy movements? Dr. Mankodi.
Good. Okay. Can you hear me clearly? Good afternoon, everyone. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see you. Thank you.
Yes, and good afternoon to my fellow panelists. My name is Mankodi from South Africa. I'm really honored to be part of this panel, and good afternoon also to the attendees. Dealing with such a critical topic here, I think it's quite remarkable that we have this opportunity to engage this point. On the issue of what can African leaders, especially African entrepreneurs, philanthropists, what can they do to assist in the financial sustainability? I'll touch 4 points. One really is about signaling that social change is attainable. I think the more we have players that are able to put their money into the pot to fund civil society configurations, pro-democracy movement, is to signal, one, that it is possible to attain social change. Two, it signals that there is an increase in local accountability that's beginning to take place. I mean, some of these people, I think you can attest with me that in their own rights, they are really credible leaders, even before we talk of them as big business people. So if they can put their money into something that changes the continent, changes the social fabric, and changes the social dynamics, it signals to others. So the more we have more people not pulling out, but actually putting more into this work, I think it's a very powerful signaling mechanism. We definitely need a growing African philanthropic ecosystem, and that will really support the social change that we are looking for. The second point, I think, is really around corporates and businesses availing their infrastructure. I know famously that we talk about crowdsourcing happening outside corporates, but I think there is an opportunity for corporates to avail their infrastructure for crowding. And I think it's important because it's not only good for social change, but it's also good for their own business and the growing of the economy. So what do I mean by that? I think most of us will know examples like the rounding off of the change when we buy into the shops. It's a massive infrastructure that business have, whether it's in retail, petrol outlets, restaurant, but just the opportunity to make sure that they support, they avail their infrastructure, but on the other hand, it plays a role of making communities to participate. I know we might argue that, look, the amounts are nominal, but they address the point that the previous speaker has spoken to, that it actually democratizes involvement into the social change, but secondly, it diversifies the funds, which is something that we need to make sure that we don't fall into the same trap of a few people. We don't want to replicate what we are now talking about, dependency on the West, to become dependency on the few in our continent. So how do we stretch this beyond a few people? So definitely, I think corporates availing their infrastructure, because it's a huge infrastructure. To duplicate it, it will really cost a lot of money, and therefore we need corporates to come in supporting this. The third point I thought I should reflect on is corporate social responsibility. You know, it's a good thing. At the same time, it leaves a little bit of a bitter taste. But for what is worth, corporate social responsibility is important. And I also think it's also important for those who are participating already in corporate social responsibility to serve as peer advocates, to have that holding their colleagues accountable. I mean, there was a statistics that was done to say, for example, in South Africa, what we are seeing as accounted for corporate social investment should actually be 5 times what we are having at the moment. So the question is, where are the others? Why are they not counting themselves in to participate in supporting civil society organizations? So we really think that it's an important thing to say, how do we drive, or how do they drive their colleagues to say, as part of their plans, corporate social responsibility is actually an investment into being a responsible social citizen. So we think that it's an impactful thing. But the other point around corporate social responsibility is about what are the programs that are driven by, and I think the previous speaker has spoken to this, to an extent that the corporates can trust the NGO sector, can trust civil society organization, that as civil society, we are capable to develop impactful, effective programs. If the money from corporate social responsibility is coming with an agenda, it's coming with prescribed programs that need to be implemented, it actually defeats the purpose. So I think it's quite important that we begin to build this trust, that the people, the civil society organizations, they live daily in their life defining what is it that needs to be done to have this social change. And therefore they need to be trusted and not being given money also at the same time saying, this is what the money should be used for. So I think that's quite an important point. The last one that I might want to share, the role that civil society, the role that business can play, is an example of what we have been a beneficiary of as Kagiso Trust. And I'm speaking to this mindful that there are different constructs that are at play in different countries. But I think the gist of this, it's possible across the board, where corporates can literally broaden their ownership structures to create assets for SCOs. And I think this is important to make civil society organizations to participate in the economy and to build their own investment portfolios. Look, civil society organizations don't have to be locked into these ownership structures forever. That's my personal view. However, it creates a valuable platform for us to get insight and know how to manage these assets ourselves. Personally, I believe that the civil society organization, there's so much capability that while we're saying we are leveraging on crowding funding into the sector, we should be able to say, in the near future, in the middle term, in the long term, how do we begin to own our own investment portfolios? And I think we believe that it is something that we need to be exploring, and that's what we think Africa business should actually take civil society seriously, that we are able to manage our own investment. We just need an opportunity to participate in the assets that are in the country as they are managing them. So yeah, maybe let me leave it there for now.
Thank you so much, Mankodi. You bring such interesting views on this matter because, like you said, I feel like in part, a lot of companies
I don't know whether it's me, but I think we have.
I think she's frozen. She's frozen.
Frozen, yeah. Yeah, I can see her line is red there. It means she's having connectivity issues.
So we can continue, just
Yeah,
not to
yeah.
Maximize time. She has the questions, but we can oops, where's my
Yeah.
where's my video? We can engage. I don't know. I mean, I would say for those listening, are there specific questions that we could talk about now? Or maybe because I'm sure she has questions for Femi, so I'll leave her questions for Femi. But you've heard Grace, Dr. Makodi, and I. If there are any questions, why can't we change our focus from governance to private sector? We build companies ourselves, and activism then is about how more people can do what we do. We don't only solve the problem of jobs, but can fund our own activism activities. Thank you, Raymond. I mean, it's a very interesting question, but I always say this: we can't entrepreneur our way out of dysfunction. No matter how well businesses do, a business in any of our countries will only be as good as a governance framework. We joke about it, for example, with the Nigerian passport, that your green passport can close more doors more quickly than your head can spin because of the reputation of the country, regardless of the fact that the country has the richest man in Africa, some of the unicorns from the tech sector, Nollywood, music, Afrobeats, whatever it is that we're exporting, that is done by individuals, not because government give them a leg up. Well, maybe except Dangote. But anyway, people that have done things of their own doesn't change the fact that when you show up at a place, you represent the country, and that dysfunction comes with you. And there are also some things that only government can do at scale. No matter how rich anybody is, we've seen it with Tata in India. No matter how rich anybody is and you want to provide healthcare, you can't. There's only government that can provide healthcare, that can provide education, that can do water, that can do electricity, that can do roads at scale. So we have to focus on governance because it's that framework that allows businesses to work and work optimally. So that would be my response. I see Femi nodding, but I'll have him say his piece as well. Oops.
I think Njeri's back.
Oh, great. Welcome back. We just thought we'd have a conversation while we're waiting. Yeah. So we're answering Raymond's question or comment in the chat.
I'm not sure I can be able to see past chats.
It's okay. I'll copy and paste it in so you can see what the context of the conversation was.
All right. I guess, Femi, you were speaking. Let me not cut you short. You can just continue to respond to the same question and then I'll come back to you.
No, I actually hadn't started speaking, but I mean, I can jump in, and great to be here. I think I think there's one side of the problem that we're trying to tackle is how do we get more funding for nonprofits for pro-democracy work. But I think the other side that's also equally important is that unfortunately the work that we do tends to pit us against the government. And unfortunately, because the government has lots of oversight over institutions, whether it is private sector institutions, whether it is the banks that our money has to go through, one way or the other, we're always at their mercy. So I can't see you as my enemy and I have power over you and not leverage that power over you in a way to defend myself. So I think on the one hand, while it's important that we talk about how do we get more funding for pro-democracy work, I think for as long as we still have to pass it all through systems that the government has influence and oversight on, there will always be problems. And we have examples of it in Nigeria during the NSAS protests. Anytime there's protest, one of the first tools or first means that government uses to attack is to freeze bank accounts. And so, yes, let's try and get more money in. But if we have all the money in the bank and we can't get access to it, then how will we do our work? Which is why I think we can't ignore government because, like Kemi said, they have so much influence on our lives. But directly or indirectly, the things that they do will have a direct impact on our ability to do our work or not.
Thank you so much for that, Femi. It's interesting what you're saying about putting our money in banks, because how else do we get this money? How else do we spend this money? How else do we make payments? So technology-wise, particularly mobile money and cryptocurrency has been highlighted as a means of fundraising. How would you say these technologies can be used securely and effectively to enhance financial resilience? Understanding that there are potential risks associated, especially with cryptocurrencies, it's still, the space is still new to us, and we're still learning what it can do and the risks that come with it. So what would you say? How can we leverage on this technology to be used securely and effectively in a way that, like you said, governments, if we receive money, the first thing that they will come for is they freeze your accounts. What would you say then how else can we securely and effectively enhance financial resilience using technology, mobile money, and cryptocurrency, and whatever other options or alternatives are there?
So thanks a lot for the question, and it's a space I work in, and considering that I work in that space, I'll say it up front. 99% of things in the cryptocurrency space are scams and not to be trusted. And I think that then creates a challenge, because how do we encourage the use of this technology? Starting from the place that 99% of it is scam. I don't work in cryptocurrency specific. I work specifically on Bitcoin. And very intentional. To keep it very simple, Bitcoin was the first of the cryptocurrencies that was created, and was created to be decentralized, permissionless money that is owned by the community. And I think what the creator of Bitcoin did, which no other project in the space has been able to do, was that this person created the infrastructure, handed it to a community, and walked away from the project. So that there's no one single person that controls Bitcoin specifically. You won't find the same in most other cryptocurrencies. There's usually one person or a group of people at the heart. And unfortunately, human greed typically sets in. So there's always that risk of, like a Ponzi, like MMM or any other Ponzi that's happening in our countries, that you're all buying and then suddenly somebody runs away with your money. I work in Bitcoin specifically because it's decentralized and because it's very values driven, and a lot of the values also resonate with the kind of work we do with human rights activists. Specifically, the beauty of it is that you can send money from one part of the world to the other part of the world without going through any trusted intermediary, any bank, any government. What that means is someone in the US can fund your organization without passing through Western Union or MoneyGram or any bank, each of which will try and get their own share of the money that is sent before it gets to the recipient. So I'd say the first thing people in this space need to do is to build their knowledge and build their understanding around what the technology is, how it works. It has some complexities, but it's not as complex as it seems. I think the starting point is first to be curious and to go find the knowledge. The second side is to keep it simple. There will be all kinds of suggestions of things to do. NFTs is what is reigning, or it is Ethereum, or it is this. The less you do, the less you need to know, the less you expose yourself to what could be fraud. We've seen, and I mentioned earlier the NSAS protest in Nigeria, and I think we also saw it with the protests in Kenya this year. One of the best ways to mobilize democratized funding for the kind of work we do is for lots of people to chip in. Now, the problem with lots of people chipping in, again, depending on the country you are in, is that the governments are also looking at the list of your donors as people that potentially they can attack. Secondary effect if they consider you a threat to themselves. And so as much as possible, as much as we can provide anonymity to the people that are donating to our causes, as much as we can provide ease to the people who are donating to our causes, the higher it increases the chances that we can actually get the funding that we need from wherever it is in the world that is needed to actually fund the kind of work we do. Yemi mentioned, yes, it may be difficult to get single individuals to give the kind of money a MacArthur Foundation or a Gates Foundation could give to the kind of causes we do. But what kind of outsized influence and do we trade to those organizations, which we can't avoid the fact that they have funders that are tied to policies and the interests of certain institutions outside and countries outside our own. And so as much as we can mobilize that is democratized, and it's one of those things where little drops can actually make an ocean. Little Lightning transactions, Bitcoin transactions can actually turn up to be a huge amount, particularly given what our exchange rates and what inflation is doing to our monies currently in the continent. So this is an area where there's lots of opportunity, but the starting point is you need to go find out, you need to go learn more. I work for the Human Rights Foundation. We work with human rights activists, we work with nonprofits. We actually run a quarterly webinar for nonprofits that want to understand more about Bitcoin specific and how to integrate it into their work to future-proof and to help their organizations get resilient. Incidentally, the one for this quarter is starting today. So the notice may be short for lots of people, but I'll drop a link to it in the chat. If you think it's of interest, please sign up to it. You will find the information there very useful in helping to see how you can integrate these technologies into your work. I'll stop there.
Femi, you started on a high, then you took me on such a high, then you dropped us so hard. You said that 99, you even said 0.99% is scam. So I'm just wondering, because I was hoping that you would give us the other alternatives that, like you said, is decentralized, is permissionless, is
I've given you. For me, it's Bitcoin.
It's yes. I'm coming
Bitcoin.
to that.
Yes,
that
I don't touch any other thing in the space except Bitcoin. I've touched things in the space. I've lost money in the space, like lots of people have.
Yeah.
So I've decided the best way is to keep it simple with the one that I know is truly permissionless, truly decentralized, truly owned by the community rather than controlled by an individual or a small group of individuals. And one that can be created at will.
So saying what you've said, would you say then how can we latch onto that? Because of all the risks that there are, and we are trying to avoid risk. We don't have the time, we don't have the resources to take those kinds of risks because they are critical. Seeing as we're working against a very heavily funded and heavily resourced regimes and individuals, even powerful people, powerful organizations, powerful nations that can easily squash the work that we do. So what can we do and how can we mitigate the risks that are in this field in terms of whether it is even just with Bitcoin and everything else? So should we forget everything else for now? Is there no hope there? And if it's Bitcoin, how do we approach that? Let me call it throne of mercy, if that is the one thing that we can use that can help us move forward until we're able to bring in all the corporates that we're talking about, all the organizations that may have money, even crowdfunding from people who believe in the work and in the cause that we do and are willing to. But also, like you said and highlighted, people are afraid of giving because government traces back. And sometimes if you give so much money or even little money, they will chase you and come for you.
So like I said, the best way to mitigate risk is keep it simple first. There are more than 20,000 cryptocurrencies out there. Don't start dabbling. I say you don't have to be a currency trader. It's a skill that people go learn in university. So you don't do it as currency trading. Diversify some of your organization resources into Bitcoin if you can. If you get donations in Bitcoin, keep it in Bitcoin. Now, people will tell you the price of Bitcoin is volatile. It goes up, it goes down. The funds that you don't need to use in the immediate, keep it in Bitcoin. In the last 14 years, Bitcoin is the best performing asset that anyone could have acquired. If you got Bitcoin, and my organization gives out 10 Bitcoin grants every quarter. That the amount that grant converts into in US dollar terms keeps increasing year on year. Right now, last quarter, we gave it $100,000, which was 10 Bitcoin. 1 year ago, it probably came to 3 million Bitcoin. Oh, sorry, 300,000 Bitcoin. $300,000 was that 10 Bitcoin. So yes, the price goes up. But what I'd say is you're not in the business of trading, so don't become a trader. Keep the funds you don't need in Bitcoin. If you get donations in Bitcoin, keep it in Bitcoin until the moment when you need to use it. The second thing is seek knowledge. I've dropped 2 links in the chat. Please feel free to click through them. The first one will give you more information about the webinar. The second link is the login for the webinars. The lady who will be running the webinar from our end used to be the chief financial officer for Alexei Navalny, the opposition leader in Russia. One day she woke up in her organization and looked in their bank account, and they were suddenly in debt of more than 100 million Russian rubles, because the Russian government had leaned on the bank, and the bank had simply just removed so many zeros from their bank account and frozen their entire bank account. And there are lots of opposition movements across the world that can only continue to do their work because suddenly you're forced to flee the country, you're in exile, but you still have to continue your operations. You still need to pay people on the ground. You need currency that will not go through any of the existing systems, because the government still has influence over the existing system, especially if you're working in a repressive environment. The third thing is their networks. There's the World Liberties Congress. There are a number of networks online that actually train and teach and support and mentor nonprofits that want to figure out how to integrate this into their work. Reach out, follow that link, sign up on newsletter on our website, and we give continuous information. Because nothing passes education. There's nothing more important in this space than education. However, the only thing I'll say is keep it simple. Don't risk, avoid the temptation to double. If you double, you will fail at this. Keep it very simple. Don't get attracted by any new shiny thing that's out there. Yeah.
I feel like we just navigated a minefield, you know, because the world of cryptocurrency, like you said, there's many scams, and those people who know nothing about it, you know, everything that shines, glitters is not gold, even though it comes out looking like gold. So your insights are very, very invaluable in the sense that this is also an option to keep money in Bitcoin for organizations that are working in the pro-democracy movement space and in the governance space, looking at who we are working with, who we're working, let me not say against, we're working for the people, but then in repressive regimes, in repressive governments. So this would be an interesting conversation, and I'd encourage us to just register on those links that Femi has shared, so that we can be able to learn more.
And just to mention one more thing, and particularly also for you and Njeri, in December, we're going to be having the African Bitcoin conference in Nairobi. It's the biggest Bitcoin conference on the continent. So if anyone is in or around Nairobi and you're interested, I'll drop a link to the conference in the chat. But also feel free to reach out to me if you need assistance attending. Yeah.
All right. Maybe you can drop how people can reach you to talk to you about that and find out more about that. My last question, because of time, and I want to allow also for question and answer from the people that have joined as the participants, I'll ask any or every one of you, of my panelists, to answer to what would you say are the key barriers that African civil society organizations face when trying to access local funding, and how can they overcome these obstacles to strengthen their financial resilience? And maybe you might have mentioned them, but maybe you can just answer this question on how we can overcome these obstacles and strengthen our financial resilience. We can start with Grace, then maybe Mankodi, Yemi, then Femi, not necessarily in that particular order.
Okay, let me go first. I think in terms of the obstacles that we have faced when it comes to raising money locally is the misconception of what we are doing, who we're doing it for. So I think we need to be very clear in terms of who we are, our purpose, what we aim to achieve, and also starting from home, us, ourselves, investing in the work that we do. A few years ago, we had a conference in Nairobi, and we were discussing these issues, and we asked people in the room, how many of them, what issues do they feel they're most affected by? And people said corruption. And we asked people, how many of you are willing right now to write a check to an organization that is working on corruption issues? And nobody put up their hand. So are we ourselves also convinced about the work that we're doing? Let's start at home. There are ways that people are able to even contribute to their work. There's payroll giving, whereby you commit your own resources as an individual to the work that you're doing, to also demonstrate to the public that you believe you believe in the work that you're doing. Around local fundraising, I think it's also very important for us to avoid extravagance. If we're holding a conference or a workshop or a community engagement, are we realistic about the costs that we are putting? Would we ourselves fund ourselves to go for some of these meetings and engagements? That is not to minimize the contribution and the work that we're doing, but how sold are we on even just who we are and what we're doing? I would say those are some of the things that I see as barriers. So let's clearly articulate who we are, what we are doing in language that anyone can be able to understand and appreciate, and then work with those who are most invested and are our most willing allies around this work, so that then their contribution can encourage others to then come on board. Thank you.
Yeah, and if I may just come in there, just follow what Grace has said. I think I concur. One is around relevance. How relevant are we, and how relevant are our programs to the issues that people are grappling with? I think that is the first one. And then the second point would be, how do we ensure that people can trust our controls? How do we ensure that people can trust our systems to be able to account for every cent that we get from whoever is the funder? So I think that is important. How do we ensure intentional report back? So when we have been supported, how do we make sure that we are able to report sufficiently? And the last two is around collaboration. Is there a way that we can collaborate so that we are not seen as there's internal competition amongst us as organizations, where it's possible to work together, especially if there are local issues that are similar that we are engaging on? How do we make sure that we can collaborate so that we are not showing this internal split competition between ourselves as we deliver? And the last one is what Grace has said, is around, I think it's important to an extent that it's possible to show that we're not coming to the table empty-handed. And one of the critical things is around the fact that civil society organizations have got the power of knowing what communities need. And that is an asset on the table. And I think showing off that capacity is quite important. It's an asset-based development, that we do have this knowledge as an asset. So actually, while money is important, money without knowing what the real issues are and how to tackle them, it's not helpful. So I think showing off that is something that will definitely put us in good standing, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mankodi. Yemi, Femi?
Hi, did you have a specific question you wanted me to answer?
Yes, I had just asked if you would have anything to say about what you think about are the key barriers that African civil society organizations face when trying to access local funding, and how they can overcome them to strengthen their financial resilience.
Thank you. I think ignorance is one. I remember when I stumbled into leading Enough is Enough. Wasn't what I planned to do. And there was really no, I did ask questions a bit. Maybe I should have asked more. But even the questions that I asked, in hindsight now, I think I could have gotten better answers, is what I would say. Number one, in terms of a bit of what Femi was talking about diversifying how even income is kept. How do you spend money? How do you change money? What do you do with exchange rate gains and things of that nature? Number two, how do you budget? Now, this is nonprofits. We're doing governance work. It's nonprofit. And also because maybe part of it was for me, my own sense of it and understanding how I developed our salary scales, for example, was very low for many years until I realized that, wait a minute, this doesn't really make sense. Nobody else is doing this. And then it took us a bit of time to kind of recalibrate that. Yes, you can be doing nonprofit work. Doesn't mean you should starve. And I guess because for me, my sense was that since we're asking funders for money, they'll be more interested in funding projects rather than funding overheads. But just finding that delicate balance, I think, was really very important. I have hair like sticking out. Okay, here we go. Finding that delicate balance, one. Two, certainly agree with Dr. Makodi around collaboration rather than competition. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge because this same organizations trying to do similar work, going after the same sources of funding. But this kind of thinking creatively around how do we get funding, who is our target audience, how do we groom a different type of people to fund the work that we do, hopefully would help. But I think also, let's also be honest with ourselves that a lot of us are in competition and unnecessarily so. I say it in the Nigerian space all the time, there is a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to do. And there's really no reason why we can't complement the work that other partners are doing, rather than literally duplicating the work and not having as much impact as we would if we complemented for scale. And on that, funders are also a huge problem with that. Funders have the power to force grantees to work together. But what's, at least in Nigeria, what I've seen is funders literally giving money to 3 different organizations to do the same thing. And that just doesn't help the space. And on funders as well, I think for me, that is just we just need to push back a little bit more. Also sharing results from either other countries or other projects. So Nigeria has 36 states. Someone has done a project in Sokoto that didn't work out so well. I write a proposal in Enugu. And instead of you to connect me with a proposal in Sokoto, you declined because Sokoto failed. And I wanted to do the same thing. Why not the lessons from Sokoto so Enugu can then try it? Because at the end of the day, part of it is just piloting in different ways just to see what works and what doesn't work. And then lastly, I think it was Dr. Makodi that made the point about CSR and private sector. I completely agree. I mean, rounding up sense or change so that communities have a say as a way of also getting money, getting businesses to partner. Very important, but the structure and the logistics of it might just be a bit challenging. Maybe Femi can help with that. Because in a sense, it has to be almost very localized so that within a space. Otherwise, if you put in a pot of money together, who then decides how it gets administered, which organization gets what share, and things of that nature. But I think there is something there, and I certainly agree with you. Maybe it's the bank that will be able to do that and then decide how to share the money between different organizations. And I'll say lastly for me is clarity about what the issues are. So an organization that's focused on education, that's focused on health, that's focused on what I call a bit of the softer issues, should certainly knock on the doors of private sector, knock on the doors of religious institutions, knock on the doors of associations, and ask for support, ask for donations, put it in formats that they can relate to, not depending on who you're asking, large amounts, small amounts, but engage players, stakeholders in the community to see the value. Those of us that work in the governance space do have a bit of a different type of challenge. I think Femi's point around the anonymity of Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, is something that we should certainly explore. And what other investment or financial vehicles allow people who are interested in the private sector to give money without worrying about government backlash. And then secondly, as individuals as well, how are we helping individuals connect this to their quality of life? I mean, EIE has something we're slowly developing, and just speaking to individuals and letting them know that this, like, if you understand it and value the work that we do, why don't you give $5 a month? Why don't you give $1 a month? So that you also have a shared stake in the outcomes. And I think maybe it was Dr. Makodi that made the point around, or Femi, rather than large sums of money, small amounts of money that get people engaged in the process. But there is a lot to talk about. And we need to be honest with ourselves around, again, back to Njeri's beginning question, are Africans willing to fund their democracy? Oh, I'll end with this. And I think you made that point, which is very important, that democracy is not foreign. I mean, it's foreign to some African cultures, but it's not like it was completely foreign to the continent until the West brought it. So, but a lot of us don't understand, it's not part of how we are taught in a lot of countries. So that citizens grow up not understanding the agency they have or the voice they have in a democracy. And we need to bring that back. And that costs money. So even at the very most basic level, we're not planning a protest, we're not trying to regime change. If you do believe in a democracy, would you support educating young people in Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa to understand what that means? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contributions. I really want to echo a lot of what is being said, but I'm looking at the time and I'm getting a little bit antsy. Femi, do you have something to say?
Yeah, just to add a few things quickly before we get questions. So one is, I think we need to stop doing things the way NGOs do it. That doesn't work. I think there's a paradigm amongst nonprofits around approach to how we fundraise, how we communicate, the things we do that may not necessarily be achieving results, but we're stuck in that mindset, and that's the way we operate, and it's not achieving the results we want. So I think first we need to be in a mind frame where we're willing to try things that may not seem typical for nonprofits, may not seem typical for activists, but they deliver the results we want to get the resources we need to do the work that we need to do. I think that we need more storytelling in the space. We need more storytelling about the work we're doing, why it's important, and the impact of the work we're doing in ways that people can understand it. We need, tying to what Yemi said around bringing in new funders into the space. There's an entire generation of young people across the continent who do not like the fact that the continent is the way it is, who are making new money, and who will be willing to invest in bringing some form of change. I shared a link as well in the chat. The amount of funding that comes to the continent from the diaspora dwarfs anything that comes in through international development aid or global philanthropy. But we need to tell the right stories. And we've seen instances in the past where once you tell the right stories, then people are willing to actually get involved and fund things. And then I think clarity on the why, on why we do what we do, on our theory of change, on why our work is important. I don't think there's enough storytelling of that. I think there could be much more of that. If we put that front and center, if we lead with that, then we would attract people who believe that the work that we're doing is important, and hopefully they'll be willing to put resources behind it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all of that. I want to take a few questions that have come in the chat. And any of my panelists, feel free to take it. There's a question that Camila has asked. Often, donors and international financial institutions require recipients to make structural... Can you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, to make structural or policy changes as conditions for giving resources. These changes have been proven to be detrimental and mostly benefit the West in the long term, while leaving African countries in high debt. The question here is, what ways can ensure foreign funding models will not be an impediment to building financial resilience in Africa? So there's a lot of conditions that have been put for giving resources by countries, by the West. And these conditions, more often than not, they leave African countries in high debt. So what can be done to ensure that we are not left, the funding models do not leave Africans in high debt and are able to build financial resilience? That is the question. Grace, can you take that question?
Yes, I think you can hear me clearly, I hope.
Yes.
I think there are ongoing conversations even around establishing Africa-led, Africa-focused funds that can really go to the core issues of our continent and what we're hoping to do. I think those conversations are very important for us to even fast track. How do we support civil society? But more importantly, how do we in civil society change our mindset to recognize that at this point, we need to already have our own resources. We need to invest in terms of building income generating methodologies that can then harness resources that we need. So there are conversations, actions going on to put pooled funds together, catalytic funds together as well, conversations around bringing private sector on board as well, to really support core issues around governance in Africa, sustainable development. So how do we ensure that we are in those conversations, that they're not being led either by private sector or by venture capitalists, but we're also on the table to really bring forward the key issues that we have.
Does any other panelist want to handle that question any other way? And if you have any questions, feel free to put them on the chat. I will ask them.
I think a couple of things. One, as nonprofits, we need to know what our funding mix is. So what percentage of our funding is coming from sources within the continent? What percentage is coming from sources outside? What percentage of our funding is unrestricted? What percentage is tied to specific projects? We need to have ideas on what the ideal percentage split should be. And then over time, we need to intentionally start working towards reducing the amount of our funding that's coming from sources that tie lots of conditions to it. I think the second thing, which I've seen in my previous life, where I ran a social innovation center in Nigeria, which by the way was a for-profit organization, which got grants from all the major grant makers. One thing that consistently happened in conversations is we'll talk about the value we're going to provide for a while. Then when it gets to the stage of, okay, we want to fund you now, what is your organizational structure? What are you registered as? We tell them, oh, we're registered as a for-profit business. And they always go, oh, we don't know if we can fund a for-profit business. But then they go back, they figure it internally, and they still come back and fund us. So what I'm putting that out to say, you don't have to say yes to every condition that is put before you. If you can clearly identify and show that you have value to deliver and you're in the best place to deliver it, then you have a bigger say in any negotiation around the terms and conditions for the funding that you receive. But if you go to funders with the intention of, if you don't fund us, we will die, then you will have no choice but to accept any terms and conditions that come with the funding that they give you.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the problems I think most organizations and even individuals of those organizations have had is thinking that you must do everything that you're told without question and not risk losing the money that you're getting. We've been left on a very survival mode so that you think, I desperately need this money, or if this money doesn't come through, like you said, I will die. And we need to change our mindsets, because there's some money that some organizations we don't want to work with, we don't want to be associated with, but just because they're giving the money, does that mean you'll take it? Because then it compromises your very values of the things that you stand for. And being seen in association with such an organization, questions questions who you are and what you stand for. So we also have to think and believe that we can do what we want. But more importantly, we have to start looking within. One of you said something about saying, it was Grace, saying that, asking in the room, what are the problems? And people said it's corruption. And then people said, so then who is willing to write a check and give money towards any organization that they believe is doing the right work? We must start believing in ourselves, because if we don't, then clearly we're going to continue depending on the West. And then we're not going to move, because then they decide how we move, they decide how far we move, they decide how long we move, because if we're not moving for ourselves, then we can't be able to move as we will. It's gonna get better, but we have to be able to support ourselves and believe in ourselves. I see there's a question that has been sent in French. I don't know if it can be the translator. Are you able to say that? There's a question in French that I cannot read or understand. Hamani, I'm sorry. I don't even know how to say that in French. Can the translator
say? Désolé. And my French is quite bad. I was trying to see if I could figure it out. I get a general sense of it, but I think not good enough to but there is translating service going on, no? I thought there was.
Yeah, he says he does not have access to the chat box. Maybe you can say it out loud.
Yeah, if you can unmute your mic and just say it.
Yeah.
Or you can type it to you. If you can chat with you, you can type it to you and you can copy and paste it to the group. Or unmute and just speak. Or make...
I think the question is something around how do we make democracy work without overemphasizing the role of money? And how do we make, because democracies are expensive in Africa.
Very. Actually, Google Translate is a friend, really, to be honest.
It is.
How do we make democracy effective without necessarily being so expensive?
I mean, I could speak a bit to that. I think, unfortunately, it is expensive now, and it will take a bit of time to reverse that trend when there becomes consequences. I see Joyce has the translation. Just know how to make the money, whatever money or power of money that is a reality in Africa. Thank you. I would say that it will take time, and the time will come from there being consequences for people in political office. Because it's expensive, because there are no consequences. So you can steal money, run a very expensive election, need a lot of money to campaign because of the foundation that we have laid. And my own sense is that that can only change where there are very hard consequences for people not delivering on democracy, and then raising the bar on the number of people that choose to come forward.
Yeah, I mean, I share that view, because most of us sitting here, we run programs that try to unlock value for the citizens, and you'd hope that, for example, government will adopt and scale, as you were saying earlier. And I think without democracy, without people, and I saw somebody saying, what is activism? Without people being able to have a voice, to be able to say, why is this, if it's a good practice, why are we not adopting it or adapting and adopting? Because it end up leaving us with projects that are only benefiting a few while the challenges are across the country. So unfortunately, it is that expensive, and we need to find a way of definitely pulling the funding in so that this can really take place. I mean, maybe also to add is that honestly, there are a lot of institutions that are really not working for social change, and we unfortunately cannot assume that organizations that are out there are geared towards supporting the kind of work that we're talking about. So there has to be that kind of a force to say, where institutions are not supporting the direction that we want to take, let's have a democratic process to challenge those systems. So it is a lot of money and a lot of time. That's my view.
Dr. Mankodi, there's a follow-up question. I don't know if this is a follow-up question. Reading from the Kagiso Trust website, it appears the organization was once donor-funded and has now transitioned to giving grants themselves. Could you maybe share with us how that was achieved and what lessons the rest of us on the continent can learn from that?
Oh, sure. So I mean, I'm speaking in a humble tone towards this. Look, I think we went through being donor funded, and we also reached a wall, in the sense that, and in particular when democracy, or during 1994, when we had a democratic government being in power, funding from the West dried up, literally dried up. And the leadership then, I think, in good foresight, took whatever that was left in a bank account, I'm just putting it in that simple terms, to say, unfortunately, we have to gear down. We have to scale down and invest the funding that we have so that we can build up. It meant huge sacrifices. A lot of good employees who are social activists had to be retrenched. So it didn't come as a smooth upward curve. So there have been blood on the floor along the journey, unfortunately. So over time, we were fortunate that the country adopted the principle of broad-based Black economic empowerment, and that required certain transactions and deals. It was not really a prescription, but those who wanted to be seen as relevant or participate in government tenders, they needed to show the participation of organizations or individuals who were previously disadvantaged. And that brought Kagiso Trust into the space where, as an organization, we were then part of the ownership schemes of some incredible organizations. Some of them were banks, which a little bit of the shareholding meant a lot of money for us as a developmental organization. But that period also taught us lessons to say, what else do we have? Can we commoditize skills? Can we commoditize our assets? Can we commoditize buildings where we have buildings? So that journey of being able to participate in economic development, we took it very, very serious, such that as a foundation, we do own an investment company, for an example, because we realize that what happens when that money, the very money runs out? Can we operate differently? Can we operate exactly the way the investment organizations are operating? So that has given us the leverage to grow the asset base from what it was and to be what it is at the moment. I must say, we are doing very well when it comes to funding programs that we are self-developed programs, but we are now engaging and grappling with how do we support other organizations like ourselves? We're talking about a leverage fund. And why a leverage fund? We are thinking somebody must be a starter. Somebody must show that we are willing to put money into a fund which we hope you as business will come in. So it's one of the things that we're trying to come up with. It doesn't make us a fully fledged funder of other civil society organization, but it does say ourselves and others who are able to put our monies together to get into that space. So it's really been a very, very, we needed to even build different competencies in the organization, have investment practitioners, so become a very different NGO, if you like, because now you need different type of skills. You know, I listened to Femi talking about managing Bitcoin. It's quite a different skill, and it's not typical for civil society organizations, but those are the skills that you must bring. And it took a long time. I mean, it took many years to come to where we are. So it's not something that we can say we were good at it and we managed to do it very quickly. So it was a long learning curve. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because there are lessons that we need to draw from each other. Where have we, what has happened, what has been successful in organizations and in some spaces that others are really struggling with. So even sharing some of the insights that your organization has been able to go through and transition through and be where it is today is something that we can draw lessons from. I want to bring this to a close. It's 5 minutes past the time that we were supposed to stop. Unfortunately, I can't take any other questions, but I really want to give hands up to all our panelists, to Dr. Mankodi Moitse, and to Femi, and to Grace Mwangi, and even Femi. I said Femi and Yemi. Yes, I knew I was going to make that mistake with this too. Thank you so much for your contributions, for sharing your insights, even sharing your challenges. We Africans, we are so much like a family in our struggle, and we must continue to support one another in our thoughts, in our endeavors, and even sharing the lessons that we are learning from what is happening within our countries. We've opened up our borders, we've opened up our as different countries, we've opened up our lessons that we're learning, what we are winning and where we're losing. And just seeing other countries win is inspiring to other countries that are struggling. So keep sharing, keep opening your boundaries, keep sharing your thoughts and your ideas so that together we can grow. We are the richest continent in the world. We are the youngest continent in the world. So the future belongs to Africa. The future is Africa. So together we shall rise, but we have to work together and we have to support ourselves. Our solutions are homegrown. Our solutions are here. Our solutions, we are the solutions of today and of the future. So let's believe in ourselves. Let's give to the causes that we believe in. Let's give to the people that we believe in, and let's strengthen our institutions to go where we are going. Thank you so much to all our panelists, and more so to all the participants who are able to stay with us even as we've extended a little longer. I really appreciate your time, and we hope that we can continue to connect and to engage. So thank you so much, and I guess this is it. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you. You can look at the chats. Femi,
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Femi has left some connections you can check. I see also Grace has left a website you can look at and some resources that the panelists have shared. So feel free to stay on and just copy and open those links that have been shared, and we can continue to engage. But from me, this marks the end of this webinar, and thank you so much for all your contributions. Goodbye.